Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to everyone present here. This is Harshit, your host for today's guest lecture. This is the third and the final lecture of our guest lecture series of the Techno Management Fest of IIT Patna, that is Celesta. This year, Celesta is being held in a hybrid mode, with the guest lectures happening in the online mode. Today, we have with us Mr. Anil Kakodkar. He was the director of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center from 1996 to 2000. Then he moved on to become the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and the secretary to the Government of India, Department of Atomic Energy, during the years 2000 to 2009. Mr. Kakodkar has been a key contributor to India's strategic program. On May 18, 1974, he was one of the very few chosen people who participated in India's first successful, peaceful nuclear explosion experiment at Pokhran. Later, in May 1998, he played a key role in a series of successful nuclear tests conducted at Pokhran. As a direct result of all the work that Mr. Kakodkar has done for the nation, he has been awarded Padma Shri, which is the fourth highest civil award, Padma Bhushan, which is the third highest civil award, as well as Padma Vibhushan, which is the second highest civil award. He has created a roadmap for shaping the third stage of India's nuclear power program, aimed at tapping the vast energy potential of our thorium resources not only as a source for electricity production but also as a primary source for other forms of energy use. Mr. Kakodkar has a phenomenal contribution in the advancement of India's atomic energy program. Team Celesta gladly invites you, Mr. Kakodkar, to our guest lecture series. Handing over to you, sir.
Thank you, Harshit. My greetings to all colleagues, students, friends from IIT Patna. I also would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of Celesta 2022 for this invitation and the opportunity to talk to you. What I wish to do today is to talk to you about a very important subject in the contemporary context, and that is clean energy transition. So let me share my uh, slides with you, screen with you, and what has happened? Where is my screen? I have problem in sharing. Yeah. Are you able to
Hi.
see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
Okay, good. So I'm going to spend some time with you discussing the clean energy transition in India, a very macro kind of view. And as I said, this has become important in recent times in the context of the threat of global warming that is bothering us all over the world. And I think this is probably in India, this problem is particularly acute and more serious. And and at the same time, uh, there is a commitment to reach net zero by 2070. So, how should we be managing this clean energy transition in India is what I'd like to share with you. So, the outline of what I'm going to talk is the following. I'll first talk about the present energy supply demand scene and the potential extrapolation uh, in terms of the transition that scene is likely to see to 2050 and 2070, Uh, then I'll talk about challenges in green energy transition. Followed by that, I want to spend a couple of minutes on importance of biomass. Then look at potential mega trends. How do we see that happening? The overall clean energy transition. And then challenges in renewable energy integration, and then talk about further directions for nuclear energy. So that's broadly the theme. Now, I thought of talking to you about this because I think there is the discourse in our country is not sufficiently enlightened, in my view. It is more driven by perceptions rather than India specific detailed analysis with assumptions which are realistic in Indian context. And it is in that context, I'm not going to present any detailed analysis or something like that, simple back of envelope numbers. But I think those are more robust in terms of basing a right argument. And I hope you will get your own respective messages out of this. Now, it's clear that you know we have to make this clean energy transition, but we are also on a development path, and so our energy requirements are going to be continuously increasing. And for us to reach a human development index comparable with the best in the world, as a minimum we need to increase our energy consumption by a factor of at least 4 or 5. And as you can see from this figure on the right hand side top corner, now this is okay as long as it was business as usual. Now we are talking about, in terms of deriving that energy. Earlier we were deriving that energy from several alternatives, mostly fossil: coal, crude oil, natural gas. Now, in net zero scene, all that cannot be used in a big way, or if at all we use some of it, we have to support it with carbon capture and sequestration so that there is no big CO2 addition in the environment. So it means that the clean energy, that is nuclear, hydro, and renewable energy, which is a very minuscule percent, 3.7% of the total energy basket at the supply end, we'll have to jack it up by, in fact, 2 orders of magnitude before we can meet our requirements in a carbon free manner. So this is the first segment that we see a major both increase and a transition towards clean energy. So, on the user side, uh, earlier the primary supply used to be electricity, then diesel, petrol, gas, and of course some hydroelectricity and biomass energy and so on. After the transition, it is bound to be only electricity, bioenergy, and hydrogen, because that is the only way you can meet all the requirements. So it's not only a challenge on the supply side. Supply side, you have to find sufficient clean energy resources. But on the demand side, for example, if you are making steel, instead of using coal and coke for making steel, we may have to use hydrogen and change the processes. Same thing is true with fertilizer, same thing is true with uh, cement and so on. So it's a challenge both ways, on the supply side as well as demand side. Now, on the demand side, we have, there are several segments, user segments. Let's broadly divide them in three: residential and agriculture, industrial, and transport. Now, residential and agriculture, which is about 31.8% of the total current energy use, and which is met by both electricity and which could be from the grid, from the solar energy. Uh, it is also met by bioenergy or diesel and so on and so forth. But that would change to that should change in my view to electricity and biomass, simply because I think it's more convenient. There is sufficient biomass. One can convert that biomass into clean energy. Biomass, it doesn't add to carbon dioxide, but clean in the sense you must clean it up of all particulate matter. It should not damage the air quality. And it can contribute a lot to rural economy, and it will avoid using hydrogen in rural areas, in kitchens, rural or urban kitchens. So that's one transition which uh, I can visualize. Of course, one can argue, different people will want to sell different things, but this, according to me, is more appropriate. On the industrial segment, which is the major segment, 57% of the current energy use, it will obviously be electricity, hydrogen, but it would also, I think, hydrocarbons would still have a role to play, or maybe even coal would have still some role to play. And that, uh, in a net zero scenario, would need to be backed up by carbon capture and sequestration. And then transport sector, which is around 11-12% of the current energy use, it will completely change from the internal combustion engines to electricity or e-mobility, and also hydrogen mobility. Hydrogen converted to electricity using fuel cells and followed by electric traction. So that's a major transition that one sees. Now, as I mentioned, the will need to increase total energy by say 4 or 5 times, but we'll have to also worry about uh, in what form that energy would be supplied. And by the time India can be expected to surpass annual per capita consumption level necessary to be on par with the best in the world, the threshold per capita energy consumption, taking into account improved efficiency as a result of clean energy transition, could be around 1400 kilogram oil equivalent per capita. And that translated to total energy consumption in the country will amount to something like 28,000 terawatt hours per year. And that, the present level is around 6,700 terawatt hours per year. So we're talking about uh, that 4 times increase in total terms. Now, if you want to derive this energy in a completely carbon dioxide emission free manner, then the choice you have is renewable energy and nuclear. Renewable energy consisting of solar, wind, small and large hydro, biomass, and tidal. Now, the total potential of this is around 8,000, terawatt hours per year, and which is way short of 28,000 terawatt hours per year. And so it's clear that nuclear energy will have to play a very big role, and there is not enough realization of this fact in the country. Now, there is some data here on the biomass availability in the country, And this is, most of it is so-called non-commercial energy. So it's not calculated or accounted for uh, in the overall energy calculus. But we are clear, so there's so much of uh, dung cake that we use in our kitchens. There is so much of firewood that we use in our kitchens. There is so much of surplus agricultural waste which is equivalent to energy, and there is municipal solid waste. Now, this is a sizable part of our energy import, and so according to me, we should give emphasis on using biomass in meeting the requirements of the sectors which are not technologically very savvy as of now. And that's where I said that the kitchens where we safety is paramount. So rural as well as urban kitchens, we should use this biomass to derive uh, the compressed biogas, for example, or uh, the uh, the natural gas which is of biological origin. It is you make the methane enriched to a sufficiently high level. So by biogas supply. And then, of course, there will be some surplus which can be used for running tractors by providing ethanol or biogas and things like that. And this would help in reducing imports. This will help in decarbonizing rural energy sector. It will also help in enhancing economy of rural areas. So my strong recommendation in the transition is we must give that emphasis to biomass. Other megatrends that we could think of are that, as I said, while the total energy would increase 4 to 5 times, the clean energy part, which is very small today, today most of the energy we use is not clean. So the clean energy use will go up 80 times, and that's a part of planning technology transition. And this is very, very important. And and this has to come essentially, as I said earlier, through renewable and nuclear. Now, except biogas, all clean energy sources, whether it is solar or wind or hydro or even nuclear, they all produce electricity first. So, unlike the previous time when we would get coal or oil and convert that to electricity and put to use, here the primary energy production would be in the form of electricity, and then we need to convert that into traction for automobiles, or into some fluid fuel like hydrogen by converting electricity to hydrogen through electrolysis, and so on and so forth. So which would mean that the share of electricity in the overall energy scene would go up drastically, because electricity would become the primary source for many other user segments or demand side segments. So one obvious thing that we can visualize is from current 18-20%, this share of electricity would go up to something like 35%, 40% if hydrogen is produced uh, by means other than electrolysis. Because then you can use that electricity for transportation and all, and that will be the increase. And hydrogen can be produced by means other than electrolysis by directly splitting water. Thermochemical splitting is one, but there are other technologies which might evolve as a result of scientific research and development. And that's, I think, a major thrust for all of you. Now, if that is not the case, and if you have to produce all hydrogen using electrolysis, then share of electricity may well go up to 80%. The remaining 20 may be biomass and other uses. And this is going to be a major transition, and it is for us in the country to decide Obviously, directly producing hydrogen without going to go through one route of producing electricity and then using electricity to produce hydrogen, directly producing would obviously be more energy efficient, and also as a result it will be cheaper, but the technology is not as advanced as steam electrolysis, for example. So everybody talks about steam electrolysis, and for all I know that will arrive on the industrial scene earlier, but we should remain conscious that it may be a transitory phase, and very soon we should get the hydrogen, uh, direct production of hydrogen without having to go through electricity to be brought in. Another point that we need to know is when you have such a large share of electricity in our electricity mix, we need an optimum mix of electricity generating systems to assure diversity of supply, optimum peak capacity investments, and stability of grid. When a grid stability is a challenge in itself, and you can't have it of all variable energy sources, because then stabilizing grid would entail much higher costs, and we are already seeing those trends. I won't go into the detail, but here is a proof that if you don't have sufficient share of the so-called dispatchable power, this study is looking at uh, a mix of nuclear and renewable energy. And if you say that you will have zero carbon electricity produced only through renewable energy, then you'll be sitting on that hump of the tariff, electricity tariff, which could be two times or four times. This study is done in US for some regions, electricity regions in US and some in China. But I can see that Indian picture is not likely to be any different. And of course, it would also mean that there must be large share of nuclear. So the key elements, according to me, of sustainable clean energy policy should be, as I said earlier, electricity, hydrogen, and bioenergy should be the key feeders for meeting energy demand. You must reserve the uh, compressed biogas for cooking energy, bio CNG for running agricultural machinery, and kind of, create something like 2,500 terawatt hour per year contribution through bioenergy. We must emphasize decentralized renewables for rural and remote areas, because that I think makes a lot of sense. But while we can do that through microgrids, but we should have microgrids which are also connected to the main grid, so that uh, should there be some mismatch or something, there is support from the main grid. We should develop and deploy solar thermal and high temperature nuclear reactors, quite in contrast with solar photovoltaics and current generation nuclear reactors, which only produce electricity. For hydrogen production through thermochemical splitting of water. And this requirement is as large as 15,000 terawatt hour per year. So I think this is a major chunk of or major share which a lot of technology is yet to be developed. And of course, we must augment electricity generation based on optimum mix of renewable, hydro, and nuclear, which would account to something like 10,000 terawatt hours per year or more. And that would depend on the shortfall in hydrogen production through high temperature electrolysis. And then, of course, we must also develop carbon capture uh, to take care of the balance, because, as I said, fossil fuel use may be inevitable. So that's the broad transition that one expects to see. And attendant with that, there are several technologies that we need to deploy. For example, steam electrolysis or solid oxide fuel cells, thermochemical splitting of water, energy storage of different kinds, including thermal storage, production of hydrocarbon substitutes using hydrogen and biomass, because that also is important, and CCUS. Now, I will stop here. Of course, I can go on in individual segments and tell you, but I suggest I stop here and we get into question answer session and use remaining time into a two-way discussion rather than a monologue from one side. Is that okay?
Yes,
Hello?
sir, it's completely fine. Yes, sir, it's
Yeah.
completely fine. You can move
So
on to
I'll,
the
for
question
the
and answer
time
section.
being, stop sharing and then we can get into question answer mode. And if for
Yes, sir.
some reason I require any slide, then of course I will get back to this slideshow. Okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing that information. We felt really well learning so much about the energy transition. Uh, Now, we would like to take up some questions from the audience. First, we have a question by Chetty Reddy Srinitya. She's asking, generation of power from nuclear sources is effective, but at the same time, health hazards also increase due to nuclear waste and radiation. How can these problems be tackled?
Yes, I was almost certain that this question would come. And I think there is no activity where there is no risk. Now, and that is true with nuclear. Now, humankind's familiarity with nuclear came in through nuclear weapons, the attack on Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So now, strictly speaking, there is nuclear bomb and nuclear reactor. They operate on very different principles, and nuclear reactor cannot explode like a bomb. Now, but that it is deep on human mind. So there are several apprehensions which get raised on that count. There is also an issue about big accidents. Chernobyl accident took place. Fukushima accident took place. Now there have been surveys done on the health effects, and both Chernobyl as well as Fukushima. Fukushima, of course, there has been no fatality, and also there is no harmful effect of radiation. Some people have been exposed, but nobody has seen harmful effect. And these are studies done by responsible multinational group of scientists. So it is not somebody fudging data. The results have shown that Chernobyl, it has been done twice, where it has shown that because of the large scale displacement, the psychosomatic effects have had greater consequences than the health effects of radiation. Health effects of radiation in terms of thyroid cancer, there have been some, but the psychosomatic effects have been much more, and which again means the same thing, that because we are so afraid, we tend to displace people in a disproportionate manner. And in fact, if you had displaced less number of people as a part of protection, the psychosomatic effects would have been lesser, and there would not have been any increase in the radiation in any case. And so the point I'm making is that there is this fear. So if you now Google and look at, for example, fatalities per kilowatt hour of energy produced in different modes of electricity generation, and this data is available in several sources on Google or internet, and you put a rank where the consequences are maximum and where consequences are minimum. For nuclear, you have to search it at a place where the consequences are minimum. So, but this is not easily digestible. The other way to put it this is radiation causes cancer, which is clear, but so also many other things which cause cancer. Now you look at how do you treat cancer, and one of the most important method of treating cancer is also radiation. So you may say radiation causes cancer, I may say radiation cures cancer, and both are true. So the point is, one has to be little objective and familiar. Now today we are faced with climate change, and every time there is a major event, extreme event, the life lost is much more than what might happen or what had happened in Chernobyl, for example. On the other hand, if you have sufficient share of nuclear electricity in the energy system, and we successfully avert carbon dioxide increase or 1.5 degrees temperature rise, then we will avert so many deaths as a result of climate change. See, climate change is a much larger, it can cause much higher or much larger level of harm. And so it is this balance that is required to be understood. And of course, the technology has been continuously evolving. So while this apprehension is right, and we must engage with people uh, to bring them the right information, and of course, we must take all precautions, improve the technology. There are now designs where there will be no impact in public domain. You can design reactors where there will be no displacement of people. So the problem vanishes. So this is an evolution that we must hasten because it's very important for survival of mankind. So that is what I would say. Any further
Thank
question?
you. Yes, sir, we have more questions. Thank you for such an insightful answer. The next question that we have is from Shweta Kumari. Sir, what are the biggest barriers to a sustainable energy transition in our world?
Well, the biggest barrier I will say is poverty. You know, at one stage, Indian Prime Minister Madam Indira Gandhi had said poverty is the biggest polluter. People burn fuel to produce carbon dioxide. Why? Because energy is required for survival, and if I don't get clean energy, I will use whatever energy is available to me.
Yes.
For example, in rural kitchens, in spite of whatever one may say, people tend to use cow dung, cakes, and firewood. And of course, this is not carbon dioxide, but the particulate level in our kitchens or rural air quality in our kitchens is very bad, and is a cause for several health problems in our women and young children. So you want to hasten transition, transition to clean energy. It's going to require investment. It's going to require technology. Now today, how is the world working? There are some countries which are vendor countries, and there are other countries which are buyer countries. So rich countries are vendor countries, poor countries are buyer countries. Now, in that mode, we have to spend much more disproportionate money on buying of technology and technology products. You do the same thing in a in a poor country like India. See, for example, we built our nuclear reactors at half the cost. India can spend or a moon mission or a Mars mission at a price which is a fraction of what Western countries have spent. Why? Because India has that qualified human resource, but they are still, they may be getting better salaries compared to the Indian context, but compared to Western salaries, their salaries are quite low. And high tech has a lot of customized content. So it's a major part of the capital cost of the products. So my argument has been that if you go by this fact that Western countries will develop technology and we believe that their technology is better, we are poor people, our technology is somewhat inferior. then we have to pay a very heavy price for clean energy transition. If we do things here, and that is why problem with photovoltaic. For example, photovoltaic, we are all talking 80% money goes abroad. For a country like India, technologically advanced country, so much of work happening in our IITs and research lab. Why can't we do near 100% value addition in all clean energy technologies? We do that in nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is produced 100% within the country. And that if we do, then I think the cost involved will be much less. But the mindset everywhere in business, in government, in is all that no, we don't know how our technology will work. We should get technology from outside. And you have seen there are many examples wherever India decided to do its own technology, they have come out with flying colors. Nuclear is one, space is another one, missile technology of India is the third one, green revolution is the fourth one. I can count so many examples where when things are done here, we do it much better and much cheaper. There is no dearth of talented human beings. You are all example of that. So the need is to change that mindset. And we may be poor people, but we should think rich, think big, and think in a confident manner. And that is the, if you don't do that, then that's the bigger barrier. Can we go to the next question if there is?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have more questions. The next question we have is it possible to achieve net zero emissions of carbon for India without making high income per capita? As we all know, situation of India, then how will it be tackled?
Yes, this is an important question, and I would like to draw attention to one of the figures which I showed. That now this is very important. You know, there is a correlation, as I said, between human development index or quality of life and energy consumed. And energy consumed is also correlated with the income or per capita income. Per capita energy consumption correlates well with per capita income. So there is a chicken and egg problem. If we are poor, we can't get more energy. If we can't get more energy, how can we increase our quality of life? And if that doesn't happen, and we don't, so you have to break this vicious circle. And you can break this vicious circle only on the basis of capability of human beings. Because what is the driver? Driver is humans have needs. Humans also have the brains, so they can find the ingenious solutions to meet their needs. And that is what generates wealth. That is what creates wealth. And if you take it on forward on that direction, then you can make India richer, you can make more energy, you can improve. But if you decide that, well, we will just dig up our raw materials and export and then buy these technologies, then I'm afraid it may appear that everything is become posh and clean, but we will become hollow in terms of economy from inside.
Yeah.
And so this is an extremely important question. And the answer is what I said in answer to previous question. We must do value addition in the country and not worry. Even if it's a high-tech value addition, we should do that within the country. And as the economy grows, there is a demand for energy, and because the economy has grown, we can pay for that higher demand. And because you get more energy, economy goes even further, so it creates energy. So this vicious circle, which takes you down. If you do it right, it will pull you up and up, and that is the way India should go about. But this point is right. Uh, so we should never succumb to the fact that we are a poor country. So what can we do? We are a country of very high intellectuals, and
Yes.
that is our resource. And all of you, particularly IITians, I would like to say that it is that onus, that challenge, that responsibility is on you. and then it is doable.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question, we have Panav. He's been asking that have the Western countries put India on back foot by not allowing us to be part of the nuclear suppliers group?
No, not at all. It's in fact the other way. See, what was happening was that this is a question related to security. So I will answer this in some depth. See, India did not sign NPT because
Yeah.
NPT was discriminatory and it divided the world into countries which have nuclear weapons or which can have nuclear weapons and other countries which cannot have nuclear weapons. Now, India had no intention of developing nuclear weapons at that time, nor it was doing anything big in that area. But it had kept options open and it said that, look, we don't like this discrimination. Humanity is all same, all human beings are equal, and so everybody should have equal rights. So you cannot compromise security of majority of the world in the hands of a few five nuclear weapon
Yes.
states. Now that created a lot of embargo on technology development related to anything nuclear, not necessarily weapons, but also civilian uses of nuclear energy, electricity production, other uses of nuclear energy. They came under severe embargo. And we said, all right, we will not succumb to these embargoes. We will develop our own technologies. And we did that successfully. And our power reactors, heavy water reactors that we have developed in the country, they have proven to be some of the best in the world. In fact, uh, our reactors have shown uninterrupted continuous operation non-stop for more than 1 year on maybe 30, 40 occasions. And there was also an occasion when one of the Indian reactors made a world record of uninterrupted continuous operation of as long as 962 days. 962 days. So imagine the level of performance.
Yes.
Now, having done that, then the world realized, and of course, there are other geopolitical factors, but having done that, the world realized that we put embargo on India and India's weapon program has gone on. India has become nuclear weapon power to, it has to meet its own security needs. So the embargo has done nothing to control that, but embargo has slowed down India's nuclear power program. Although India has nuclear technology, but for example, we were running short of uranium, nuclear fuel, and then they realized that uh, energy shortages in India is going to create harm for the world because India is a big market and India's buying power depends on India becoming economically strong. So economically strong India is in global interest, and so they felt that look, this something has gone amiss, and we need to correct this. And then, of course, simultaneously there was this CTBT issues, and then there were the India's security issue. There is a global security issue, the China arising on the scene. So there is a so it, although the world was putting a lot of embargoes on India, soon there was a realization that India must be brought into mainstream because they saw India and they declared it as such that India has been a responsible country with advanced nuclear technology. And in that uh, background, uh, they sort of opened up civil nuclear cooperation, and as a part of that, India was well, the the exception was made for it was NSG, the cartel of suppliers countries, which had put all these embargoes. So they made an exception that well, now India can get uh, uh, benefit of civilian trade uh, for all civil nuclear purposes. So, in fact, we have gained out of that rather than because our autonomy, strategic autonomy, is as it is. There is no dent on strategic autonomy, and we can now get the benefit of nuclear commerce and carry on. And that's what we're doing. Our capacity factor of our nuclear power plants, which was suffering because of supply of uranium, has is now back to high capacity, 80% plus. So, in fact, it is it is not India on the back foot. I think we're on the front foot now, and many Western countries are wondering how this happened.
Thank you for another insightful answer. As a shortage of time, we'll move on to the last question. The last question is from Praveen Kumar. Public sector can play important role in shifting to clean energy, but how a college student can start in public sector of clean energy?
Well, clean energy can be handled on multiple fronts. For example, using renewable energy, you can have several individual driven enterprises. Uh, you must have heard what is his name? In fact, there are some very important startups which are doing big work in rural India on renewable energy, and in fact, some of them are startups driven by IIT students. Similarly, even on other areas, you can do several technologies because a nuclear power plant, for example, requires large number of technology pieces, equipment, and there is, for example, technology character is changing. We don't use the same technology for nuclear reactors as was being used maybe 30, 40 years ago. Instrumentation is different, control is different, sensors are different, signaling is different. And all these areas are amenable to startups, new startups. And so there is plenty of scope for student startups. Of course, a whole nuclear power plant or a whole, for example, 1,000 megawatt solar power plant, if you want to set up, or for example, a large hydropower plant you want to set up, that's a major platform. So, and it's a kind of a mix of several technologies. So there, one has to take business to a much higher level to do that. But at the startup level, whatever can be done, there are several things that can be done, and in almost all aspect of clean energy. And that's how I would say.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us your time. It was an amazing session, learning so much about NSG, NPT, and the phenomenal potential India has to shift to the green energy. It has given us such a lot of insight, and we've also learned a lot about the various challenges India is facing in that process. Hopefully, we all can together achieve that end goal one day. I would also like to thank the audience for being such an amazing listeners. And with this, we end the Celesta guest lecture series. Thank you.
Thank you. I can leave now, right?